Hello, welcome to Maison Otaku. Come in, have a seat.
I'm Justin.
And I'm Mike. And happy Halloween, everyone.
Absolutely.
Yep.
They're going to enjoy their Halloween this year.
Oh, yeah.
Because we told them to.
Yes.
Have a happy Halloween. Personal recommendation, the best way to have a happy Halloween, no Butterfingers. It gets stuck in the back of your teeth. They're always enjoyable at the first bite, but by the third bite, you're annoyed.
Yeah, but if you're young enough, you're going to get rid of those teeth soon enough anyway, so it don't matter.
I suppose so.
Yeah.
But we're talking to people who have probably seen Robot Carnival.
Yeah, this is true. This is not really our target audience. Anyway, no real news this week. I mean, there was the Letterman Hatsune Miku fiasco, but
Yeah, I mean, okay, yes, this is an impressive step for technology, for global culture. We're very glad that David Letterman has decided this is worth 5 minutes of his program. On the other hand,
kill it before it spreads.
And I mean, yeah, folks, if it's not Sharon Apple topless, it's not a virtual idol worth seeing.
And yeah, couldn't have put that better myself. That's really all there is to say about it.
Absolutely. And Mike and I haven't really bought anything lately, so there's not really acquisitions to mention, but we have experienced some things. We have gone around and found some things that are interesting, so we're going to make a little moment to talk about them. Mike, you actually discovered one hell of an unusual show.
Yeah, well, I've actually been aware of this OVA for a while. I downloaded a fan sub at least a year ago, maybe two. Dead Heat, this really obscure OVA about people racing on mechs where the bottom is like a roller skating scope dog and the top where the pilot is like a super bike. It's just like a little one-shot movie, and even more obscure, and this is the thing I found out about it recently, in Japan, which is where it was only released outside of fan subs, it was released on this weird Japan-only video disc format. This is weirder than CEDs, probably better though.
I'm certain that stone tablet clubbings are better than CED.
Yep.
More portable too.
Probably. But the reason it was released on this disc is apparently it supported 3D effects, of course, with glasses and all that. But so to my knowledge, this is the first and only 3D anime.
Yeah. And we want to give a lot of credit to Anime News Network, who's done a beautiful article regarding this phenomenally strange piece of Sunrise's vaults.
Yeah, I'll leave a link in the description for you.
Yeah. And it's really cool. I went in a slightly more highbrow direction this past week, thanks to the Avon Lake Public Library. I managed to sit down and read a bit of Will Eisner. If you're not familiar with Will Eisner, he was one of the most significant comic artists of the 20th century. Probably most notable for his work on a number of different titles that earned him the right to be the namesake of what's probably comic book writing's biggest award, the Eisner Award. What I read of his was the Contract with God trilogy, which is a collection of stories all set in a fictional Bronx neighborhood, Dropsy Avenue. It's difficult to summarize. The best I can tell you is it deals with the mortality of a neighborhood, the gradual erosion of a neighborhood over the years, the ebb and flow of cultural influence. It's a really, really, really fantastic piece of art, of literature, in comic form. And if you have the opportunity to read it, please don't pass it up. It's the best example I can give for anyone who wants to say that manga is the only place where we get stories like this, especially if you're hearing that argument from somebody who's bought more than 10 volumes of anything Shonen Jump.
Yeah.
And I know that's not usually your thing, Mike.
But I can take it or leave it.
You frequently leave it. But, yeah, so that's where our minds were at. But Mike got in some reading, too.
Yep. So, been a while. As I said, I'm going to be doing reviewing the Vampire Hunter D novels as I read them. So, just finished Volume 4, Tale of the Dead Town. Basic setup with this one. Apparently there are these floating cities all around, well, the continent, if not the world. And Dee stumbles upon a mystery where he's, hired for a job on one of these. And a bunch of crazy, I won't give too much of it away, but some crazy shit going down with some vampires on the city, which is, the whole point of these things is the humans living up there have been free from the ravages of, down on the surface with all the monsters, the nobility unleashed. So they're like, well, what the f***? The really cool thing about this one, in terms of the way it's written and the way the story goes, this is essentially what you would get, harkening back to what we said in our Kikuchi episode with Sergio Leone and Kawajiri. Kind of plays again like that. It's what you would get if Sergio Leone had directed a Sherlock Holmes film.
Yeah, very briefly skimmed over. Dee actually picks up a partner this time that isn't a starstruck woman, and it's actually a fairly competent young man.
Yep.
And there's a bit of a Vash and Wolfwood.
Oh, look, yeah, there really is. Yeah, you could definitely draw parallels to that man by the name of Dr. Tsurugi. So, and in that way and a few others, this one actually varies from some of the patterns set by the last 3 books. So there's that. This actually, I won't give anything away, I'll let you read it, but this harkens back and makes reference to some events in one of the previous books, actually giving you a sense of when these are taking place. Before getting this far, I was under the impression, Dee being immortal, that there were, decades going on in between books, potentially. Turns out it's at most only been a couple years since the first book.
Yeah.
To Volume 4, so there's that going. But, very interesting setup. Some great characters. Like I said, Dr. Tsurugi is very interesting. This man has the best name. What is it? John M. Braselli Pluto the Eighth. He is, basically this other almost companion, but his motives are a bit more hazy, his intentions are a bit more unknown. The great thing is, you ever read a book and just the way the lines are written, you can picture what their voice is? The minute I read his lines, it's just Bruce Campbell's voice popped into my head.
It really is that way.
Yeah. So, if any anime companies are out there and they ever decide to make a movie of this, please, Bruce Campbell to do Pluto the Eighth.
Yeah, I mean, Studio Madhouse, you can pull that off.
Yeah.
You've done crazier things. Redline, for instance.
Yeah.
And it's actually timely that this week you've got a Vampire Hunter D review because, well, it's Halloween.
Yep.
Things are about to get gory around here. It's time for him to discuss horror in anime. Not an easy thing to pull off, which I'm sure both Mike and I can agree on.
Yeah, with anime, horror is a lot like fantasy. It has so much potential to just nail it on the head, but it, for whatever reason, rarely does.
Yes. And
don't get me wrong, when it does nail it, it's great.
Yes.
But it's like Rentaro. It's either a masterpiece or it's shit.
Right. Some of the shows and films we're going to discuss we've actually covered previously. You can find some of it in our obscure anime episode.
Yeah, Lily Cat and Black Magic M66 took inspiration from The Thing, Alien, and Terminator, respectively.
For that matter, we, of course, can't avoid mentioning Hideyuki Kikuchi, and we have a whole
episode on him. Yep.
And some of these titles we covered in our It's Crap episode.
Yep.
But enough reminiscing, let's move on. Mike, about the only show we can agree did everything right is the show that we don't even think is really horror, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and it's Monster, but Monster's definitely a psych thriller, but I don't...
It's very difficult to call Monster horror, despite the fact that it is one of the most terrifying things in anime.
Yeah.
Likewise, my dear wife pointed out that one of the most chilling anime she's ever watched was Jinro the Wolf Brigade, which we both regard as immensely fantastic.
It's more psych thriller. Not saying there aren't any horrifying aspects to it, but it's less Mike Myers, more Hannibal Lecter.
Yes. And that's not to say that Mamoru Oshii himself isn't a horrifying individual. That man is scary.
Yes.
But we like him.
Well, that's because we're pretty sure he's working together with Masamune Shiro to breed cybernetic basset hounds.
We're not against it. I guess the easiest way to go about this is really to talk about what works and what doesn't. And you can really start with just the mood of a horror anime.
Yep. Like I talked about with Lilycat, it maintains that suspense, maintains that moody atmosphere without being overdone or making you want to fall asleep.
Right.
The music is definitely a huge part of it, of course. But first and foremost, you want either a setting that harkens to it or modify a setting in such a way, like it could take place in, suburbia, but, have it some random alley at night.
Right. Kikuchi's films, the films Kawajiri's done off of Kikuchi's work, are really, really good at this, actually.
Yes.
Demon City Shinjuku in particular.
Especially.
Because it is very slow. It is a very slow build, but every moment is kind of crafted to where you enter that little area and something unsettling happens. The setup is perfect, of just odd enough to be wrong, and then it just strips everything away.
Yep.
That was probably a very vague way of explaining it.
That's about right, though. Although, of course, sometimes you can do that right and still screw up. I'm going to refer to... Have you seen Gregory Horror Show?
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot that it was a thing. See, there's a perfect example. Mood, lighting, music, absolutely perfect. But the writing's half-assed, and that chibi 3D CG art style just kills it.
Right. And, Mike brings up the speed, and that's very critical. It's very easy to say, well, there's a lot of blood and guts and gore and monsters, and say, well, that must be horror. It's not, because if it's just 30 straight minutes or 90 straight minutes of monsters on screen hacking each other to bits without any delay to the monster.
Yep. Well, and actually, that's one thing I want to... I'm quoting someone else now. I've only seen, less than half an episode myself, so... I mean, from what I've seen, they're probably right about this, but in a panel at Colossal Con this year, someone was talking about Attack on Titan, and he was saying his friends were saying, yeah, you gotta check them out, check this out, this is the best action series ever. And then, this isn't a very good action series. And then he goes on to say, that's when I realized, this isn't an action series. What this is a fairly good horror series. And, I never really got into Attack on Titan, but when he said, you know what? Yeah, it's don't watch it as an action series. Watch it as a horror series. From what little I've seen of it, that kind of falls in line. Feel free to correct us on it if you're an Attack on Titan fan and you disagree. But I think that's a fairly sound logic.
Absolutely, and it's that instead of, well, there's the monster, and we're going to go fight it, it's...
oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap!
Yeah. When's the monster coming? What's causing the monster to come? Can we stop the monster? And that's a very important question.
You wonder as he's eating your sister.
Yes. And setting is actually kind of important about that, too. Something's been said about the necessity of intimacy in a horror film.
Yeah, definitely.
The very best horror that I've seen has always been right next door, right, small classroom. I give a lot of credit to Higurashi, When the Cicadas Cry, because it's that folksy little town, that little classroom, these few friends. It's just right, and it's not quite right.
Yeah.
It's so familiar that the instant something's wrong, you know it.
Yeah. Now, Justin and I disagree about a lot of things with that series. I'm just going to point out right from the get-go. But I will say that is one thing I can give it. It does that much right.
Right.
The moe art style, kind of.
Yeah. But that's an excellent point, is art's the other big deal there. I do think that the choice in Higurashi of taking that current moe, I despise that term.
I despise it, but it's like Lucky Star levels.
Yeah, just taking that and using it to make the viewer even more comfortable with the setting. It's a great subversion of expectations. And the subversion of expectations works to horror.
But it's, you play that card once, and after that it's utterly overplayed.
Right. It's something you can only do once.
So, or fricking, how much you want to call this horror is up to you too. It's more of a samurai drama with some action, but definitely has some horror elements. The Blade of the Immortal, man with these things in his body called the Holy Bloodworms. Basically, if he hacks off his arm, he can just shove it back on, reattaches. He can be cut into 5 different pieces, etc., etc. Anyway, super gritty. It's almost like fast ink sketch artwork. And it's just so conducive to that. And they decided, okay, we want it anime. Let's get B-Train to do it.
I'm getting the B-Train shakes again, man.
Yeah.
Getting the shakes.
Yeah.
I need...
So,
juice.
Actually, to all anime production companies and writers out there who might be listening, which probably isn't any, but I'm going to say this anyway. From now on, if you're going to do anything horror or serious and violent and disturbing,
don't hire B-Train.
Yeah, don't hire B-Train. Don't do a moe art style. Just anything but that.
Right. We're not also saying that you have to take Yoshitaka Amano character designs and run with them in the Kikuchi vein. It helps. I mean, heck, it helped Twilight of the Dark Masters fool us into watching it.
Yeah, well... Okay, we're going to talk about some of the Urban Vision main lineup now.
Oh, boy. Urban Vision, thank you so much for trying.
Yeah. There are 3 they put out, and the trailers would have you believe these are excellent. It's...
Fooled us.
Yeah. But they... I'm not going to say they were... Well, Twilight of the Dark Master was kind of bad, but I'm not going to say the others were straight up bad, but they're all just like, well, I'm glad I only paid $1 for this.
Yeah. Or, I'm glad I watched this on the Starz Action channel at midnight.
But yeah, basically the 3 we're talking about here are Twilight of the Dark Master, Psycho Diver, and Biohunter. We're bringing these up because we want to make the point that if you combine certain aspects from all 3 of these, you'd actually have something pretty serviceable.
Yeah, you would have a top-flight horror anime if you took these three and put them together.
Yeah, you need the artwork and animation and production quality of Twilight of the Dark Master. Maybe the soundtrack. The soundtrack was okay.
The writing of Psycho Diver.
Yeah, the writing of Psycho Diver, definitely. Yeah. And the interesting characters from Biohunter, combined with, I'd say, the story coherency of Biohunter.
Right. Of the three, Twilight of the Dark Master had, and we've mentioned this before, fantastic Amano-esque art that was grotesquely beautiful.
Yes, it was detailed, it was thick, it was violent. It's like anime stew.
Right. But it was a complete and utter train wreck that was disturbing in the wrong way.
Yeah, it was based on source material that was kind of just okay, and then created by, or directed by, well, just watch our episode for that, because we do a whole thing on that guy's career.
But Psycho Diver...
interesting concept,
Interesting concept, great premise.
You ever see that movie, The Cell? Wasn't that Jennifer Lopez, actually?
Might have been.
Yeah, where she, goes into people's heads and, sort of fixes problems, and then she has to go into, a serial killer's head. Very similar premise, but way more cyberpunk.
Right. And it was very interestingly done. It was just the art style was budget City Hunter.
The animation, at the very least, was, yeah.
And the characters left you cold, especially the pop star that the Psycho Diver is trying to save.
Yeah.
Which, if I'm not mistaken, that was an early voice role of, I want to say, Wendy Lee.
It wouldn't surprise me.
It may have been Wendy Lee.
She's been in everything.
It may have been Katie Vogt, though, as well.
If you know the answer to this, please comment or message us.
Right. We'll probably sort this out later, but the most important thing is she raps. And oops.
Yeah.
And we love you, but don't.
Yeah.
Although I think you learned that.
Yep. And Biohunter is... It's kind of... It's almost Guyver-ish.
It is kind of Guyver. It's sort of Guyver / Devilman.
Yeah, exactly. Combine Guyver with Devilman, you basically have Biohunter. Not as good as those two things, but in terms of the individual components, that's what you would have.
Right. And the characters are interesting, they're relatable, and never underestimate the importance of a relatable character in your horror anime.
Yep. And this one, not quite Twilight of the Dark Master level artwork, but very close to it, and very good animation.
But, yeah, those three together would have probably made it an excellent horror film. But they all break down for one of the other things that make up a good horror anime. Like I was saying, character. Have a character that's not gonna win.
Well, actually, more to the point, have at least a character that you like.
Very true.
Like, all too many recent, horror movies or whatever I've tried watching, and I'm thinking, God, I hate every single one of these bumblefucks. No, I'm watching this movie called Possession on Netflix. It's a deadbeat dad, the divorced wife, and one of the girls gets possessed by some crap while he's watching them. Between the wife, the wife's boyfriend, the deadbeat dad, and the stereotypically annoying teenage daughters, the deadbeat dad is my favorite character.
Right.
And that's not to say I like him, he's just the only one I can tolerate.
We understand that with the rise of the slasher flicks of the late 80s to early 90s, we're supposed to root for the monster.
Yeah.
The monster is our character, and it's supposed to be that moment of gratification. These terrible people getting their just desserts. But we have those. They're action films.
Yes. Well, more to the point, a monster movie where the monster is the main character only works if the main focus is on the monster. See Predator. Which actually, and even then, The first Predator versus Alien, one of the things it did right actually had okay human characters. I can't say any of them are remarkable, but I didn't particularly hate most of them.
Well, if we go back to the original Predator, how long was it before we even knew there was a Predator in their midst?
Yep.
It was amazing, really, and it's important, Show, don't tell, don't show.
Yep.
Just let the monster do its thing, and then show the reaction of these people we're supposed to relate to, and hope don't get done in by the monster.
Yep.
And then we'll be scared when they're in danger. Horrified.
Oh yeah, definitely. Now, to diverge from more American or just Western horror stuff, we're going to talk about some typically Japanese things.
Oh yeah, and
one thing actually I just recently learned about, decided to give a look. Ayakashi, Samurai Horror Tales, or just Ayakashi in Japan, because localization, I guess. This one's interesting. I'm not too big into new stuff, but I decided to give this one a look, and I'm glad I did. It's an anthology series, basically a few episodes per story arc, has like 3 main story arcs, I think. The cool thing is, it all plays out in one big, it's almost like watching kabuki theater. It's just that level of samurai drama. Really noteworthy thing I didn't realize till I checked it out. Yoshitaka Amano character designs.
Remember us saying that a series doesn't need that to be good horror?
It helps.
It still helps.
Yes.
Lately, actually, I can say Requiem for the Darkness.
Oh, yeah.
Was a recent, really good quality. Whoa, this is a good spook.
Yep.
For that matter, really, we could even give some credit to Clamp for Holic. Holic.
I don't like to.
Well, I know you don't like to give Clamp much credit,
Yeah,
but
well,
Holic is very interesting supernatural horror. It's that turnaround, even if it is just Pet Shop of Horrors.
Which actually we should talk about that too.
Yeah, we should talk about Pet Shop of Horrors.
It is way less yaoi shoujo than it looks.
Right. You look at Count D and you're like,
gay.
But
once you get past that, it's...
And you do need to get past that, because
Yeah.
Count D is one of the
he's actually
most hardcore guys.
Yeah, despite his dragon lady appearance.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's an anthology of short stories. It's very Tales from the Crypt.
It is a bit...
It's if you combine Tales from the Crypt with Vampire Princess Miyu.
Uh-huh. Which is another...
Yeah, getting onto
fun.
that. Actually, that one's interesting to talk about, because here's an example of a hit and a miss. The manga and the OVA, definite hit. Not the best things ever, but, good. If you don't know Vampire Princess Miyu, the short version is this girl is half human, half vampire, sort of, eternal 13-year-old, more or less. She has her companion larva with her, and she fights these things called Shinma, which are demon gods, is the simplest way to put it. But it's all these situations, coming across people being stalked by... Shinma essentially feed off of negative human emotions and appeal to their desires and lure them to their doom, all that great stuff.
Yeah. And the show, the OVA, and the manga all really rotate more around that than Miyu defeating the Shinma, which is great.
Until you get to the TV series where it turns into Sailor Moon.
A little bit. And the main reason that we all know about this is Matt Greenfield, whom those of you who are up on your American industry personalities may recognize as the founder of ADV.
Yep.
Hi, Matt. And are you enjoying the way your company was broken up into many, many parts?
Yep.
We sure are.
Well, and the funny thing is with fricking Miyu TV's release is the release even did it wrong and did it right, because it was the DVDs at least were released by Tokyo Pop, and the first 2 volumes or so were 3 episodes a disc, and they pulled that crap where they only showed the opening at the beginning of the first episode and the ending at the end of the last episode and just ran them together, which I don't know why they even did that in the first place, but why are you still doing it in the 2000s?
Yeah.
But then...
That was true horror right there.
Yeah. But then by the end of the series, the last volumes, like I think the second to third last volume, they have like 7 episodes on the disc. All complete. Like, okay.
Sure, let's do that.
But I will say in its defense, I hate to be one of those guys to say this because I strangle people who defend series by saying this, but you get about to the halfway point through the series, it starts feeling a little bit more horror. There's a particularly good episode concerning a butterfly Shinma. And actually I don't care, I'll just give it away, a sort of tragic human Shinma romance episode. So there's good stuff in there, it's just it starts out like a Sailor Moon knockoff.
Right. On the whole, if you go rooting around for horror anime, you're going to go through a lot of different channels to maybe not find the absolute right thing.
Yeah.
You'll go down one path, you'll end up at Monster. You go down another path, you end up at Ayakashi. You go down still another path, you end up at Yuratsuka Doji.
Yep.
But it's really fertile ground for a lot of different creative interpretations of one big concept, which is scaring the crap out of you.
Yep. So, wouldn't be a Halloween episode if we didn't talk about horror games.
Of which there are many, and of which there are considerably more successful ones than there are horror anime.
Yeah, it's...
So, that's why we're doing this little segment.
So, just going to talk about some of our favorites here. First of all, I'll mention Dead Space, and I'll really just mention it because I can't really say anything that hasn't already been said. It's Resident Evil combined with Event Horizon, only better than that sounds, go play it.
For that matter, I love Shadows of Destiny, which was a really oddball little adventure horror game released on the PS2, and it's pretty much its debut library.
Yep.
You run around a quaint little German village trying to sort out why things have gone screwy and people are disappearing and reappearing. Very neat game.
Yep. Again, I'll mention and just mention Silent Hill, especially 2, because I can't say anything that hasn't already been said a million times. Right. It's a masterpiece. Play it.
Yeah. For that matter, you can't dodge the giant elephant in the room, which is Resident Evil when it comes to survival horror games.
Actually, here's something interesting I can say with that. I do like Silent Hill more. I like them both about the same. The main thing that tips me over, even though they have the same basic control setup, I don't know why, just Silent Hill's controls work for me, but the type of tank controls in Resident Evil, I can't do them.
And the claim that clunky controls is just a Resident Evil thing is always a cheap cop-out. But really, it's very fascinating to see how much mileage has been gotten out of the idea of horror as a game mechanic, as a game idea. Mike and I were talking about this just a little bit previously, and we both agreed that Castlevania is actually a fantastic horror game.
Yep. Well, it's perfect horror survival, and possibly one of the first founders of the genre. And a lot of people might not agree with that because you are, the super-powered vampire hunter. But
even as the powerful vampire hunter, you are up against forces that are so far beyond you, with such a remote chance of survival, let alone success. The difficulty itself is part of the scare.
Yes, that is exactly why it is a survival horror game. For the exact same reason that the tank controls were intentionally implemented in Resident Evil. The difficulty, in addition to being a difficult game, takes it from being an action-adventure to building tension and making it a horror game. In addition to the blatantly obvious fact that it takes references not only from the Bram Stoker Dracula novel, but from all the Universal monster movies,
absolutely.
Hammer films, basically.
Yeah, it's so grounded in that classic black and white era of horror, which, oddly enough, a lot of this genre is when you really want. We don't get the modern monster without the classic monster, the foreigner, because let's not forget, before we knew Bela Lugosi's Dracula was a vampire, all we knew was that he was European, and that was scary enough.
Good old xenophobia. See Bioshock Infinite.
See Bioshock.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you, Ayn Rand.
But you can get so much ground out of a good scare through a video game. I mean, heck, Mike could tell you so much about Parasite Eve.
Oh, yeah. And that's one of the things I bring up with the Resident Evil Silent Hill debate. Parasite Eve is a great, I don't even want to say compromise, it's just the best of both worlds. And if you're not familiar with it, shame on you, but it's a PS1 RPG. Actually, a lot of ideas recycled from early concepts for Final Fantasy VII when they wanted to have that take place in modern-day Earth. They took a lot of the set pieces and concepts, and that became Parasite Eve. But it's a cinematic horror survival RPG set in, at the time, modern-day New York.
Done by Squaresoft before they completely lost the plot.
Yes. You follow this. You are Ayabrea. Just look it.
Yeah.
And
pretty lady in an evening dress.
And the great thing is, and the interesting thing is, you never have a party. It's just you, your armor, and your gun. But yeah, the set pieces are great. The monsters are genuinely scary. And they pick like we were talking about, the familiarity. If you just tweak it slightly, it becomes terrifying. There's a whole level that's one of the creepiest things in the whole game, where you are walking through a deserted museum at night. Yeah. Except the museum happens to be full of these mutated dinosaur bones that are now animated into these crazy zombie things.
Yeah, and it's an amazing game. Yep. It's a fantastic game.
Yeah, it's great, and it's kind of weird because they never managed to replicate it. It's had 2 sequels. The second one basically played like Resident Evil, but it's still a good game. But the third one was basically a slightly more functioning version of Mind Jack. Yeah, wrap your brain around that, and it became an action shooter.
That didn't work.
Squeenix, if you feel like it, please, another true Parasite Eve sequel. Turn-based RPG, horror survival action, and just stop losing the focus. And the focus in the original was these great characters in this terrible, messed up situation. I can't think of a single main character that I disliked.
Right.
And like I was saying with the almost compromise between Resident Evil and Silent Hill, one thing we always talk about in that debate is, okay, Resident Evil, you have these rather attractive, unstoppable killing machines, and in Silent Hill, you have, that mind screw, what's going to come after me terror.
Right.
So again, you have the best of both worlds, and Ayabrea is by far and away one of the best video game heroines ever, and easily one of the most underrated.
Oh, certainly. When you get the richness of her characterization through Parasite Eve, you're kind of left wondering, so why is she mentioned so rarely?
Yep.
What went wrong here? Possibly that it was just an also-ran at the moment. At that point in time, Squaresoft was riding the high of Final Fantasy VII.
Yep.
So the fact that they had another good game out at the time was just...
Well, it filled the gap between Final Fantasies 7 and 8.
Yeah.
But yeah, in closing, Parasite Eve, cinematic horror survival RPG, great characters, great horror, great suspense. Also, Ayabrea is my wife. Mike's claims of Ayabrea being his wife were made purely for comedic reasons. We here at Maison Otaku do not condone the claiming of fictional characters as wives or waifu, and strongly suggest that any sincere attempts to do so be met with a swift and enthusiastic boot to the head.
Well, it's that segment of the show again, and Mike, you know what happens in this segment of the show?
We get the girl in the lumbikini to get us some pizzas. No.
No. Well, we answer a question.
No, it's almost as good.
Yeah, almost as good. And this week's question comes from a girl.
Ah!
How about that?
Yeah, okay, so getting closer.
Yeah.
Ask her if she'll bring us some pizzas.
We're allowed to ask the audience questions?
It's our show, we can do whatever the hell we want.
Fantastic! So anyway, Sylvia Taylor writes in to ask, Mike and Justin, what are some of your favorite post-apocalyptic anime?
Huh.
That's a hell of a question right there.
Well, I would say Battle Angel, but I kind of already discussed that in my recommendation.
And I'd say Fist of the North Star, but I've kind of already discussed that in a recommendation.
So what else? Well,
I love... Oh, good lord, there's... Sylvia, we're going to tell you this right now. Post-apocalyptic encompasses so much of anime, it's almost impossible to get through.
Yeah, especially in the era, that we're most interested in, because that's when people still remembered, getting apocalyptic getting nuked.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry Japan, but the fact of the matter is your stuff was awesome because you remembered being nuked.
Yes. That's a hell of a thing to base an artistic vision off of. Anyway, for one, I tremendously love Space Battleship Yamato. And you might catch me on that as being not post-apocalyptic, but the events of Space Battleship Yamato are intently driven by the fact that Earth is doomed.
Yes.
If Earth wasn't doomed, there's no reason to go to Iskandar. There is no way that you're going to dig up a World War II battleship. It's just not going to happen. So that whole setup is driven by the desperation of an apocalypse, and it's amazing. And it's Nishikaze, and it's Matsumoto.
Yeah.
So
can't go wrong with that. Well, I guess going along the same lines, one I think people forget has such heavy post-apocalyptic things, After War Gundam X.
Oh, yeah.
Which many of you are probably going to disagree with on. Is probably my favorite of the alternate reality Gundam series. Now, I do want to say, I will say Wing is a better series, but I enjoyed X more, if that makes any sense.
X does so many things right that you're able to forgive some of the things it gets wrong.
Yes.
It's also the only alternate timeline series to directly deal with new types, as opposed to dancing around the new type question.
Well, on top of that, the first few minutes of the first episode is this is what would happen if the 1 year war went horribly wrong.
Yes.
It's not even spoilers. You see it in the first couple minutes. They drop every colony on Earth at once. Hence the post-apocalyptic.
Right. Which is interesting because Mobile Suit Gundam itself has its own mini-apocalypse in the fact that they dropped a colony on Australia. Yep. And there's no more Australia.
Well, there's Australia. Just Sydney is now an inland sea.
Right. So, absolutely, Gundam X is fantastic. Plus, still has the best Gundam opening.
It's definitely up there.
Right. Okay, so it's a toss-up between that and...
let's not go down that road. We'll
right.
be here for a while. Yeah. Talking favorite Gundam openings. I could do an episode on that.
Absolutely. But oh, good lord, there's just so much.
Yeah. Nausicaa.
Nausicaa's gorgeous.
Yeah. We'll have a Miyazaki episode. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Violence Jack. Basically, Go Nagai doing Fist of the North Star.
Yeah. Bubblegum Crisis.
Yeah.
Tokyo's ripped wide open.
Yep.
It's...
Honorable mention to Gray. Not especially amazing, but definitely underrated.
Oh, positively. So to answer your question of what our favorite post-apocalyptic anime is, yes.
Yes.
And I'm going to give a recommendation this week, too.
Hot damn.
Hot damn, especially because my recommendation is related to our topic.
Yes.
It's a good horror anime by a great creator. Devil Lady by Go Nagai.
Now, first, before you get into that, I do want to say, check out pretty much all of the Devilman franchise.
Yeah.
Because you can't go wrong with any of it, especially the 90s OVA.
Yeah, the Devilman franchise as a whole is cool.
Like, there was this weird offshoot manga where it's, oh crap, what are the main characters' names again?
Jun and...
yeah. Ryu, was it?
Yeah, I believe so.
Basically, instead of them being adversaries, they're buddies, and they travel back in time solving mysteries. So it basically turns into Flint the Time Detective.
Right.
And yes, I just referenced that show. But other than that, it's great.
Yeah, but that's just because Go Nagai likes having fun. But it's interesting because Devil Lady isn't fun at all.
No.
Devil Lady is positively body horror. It's Cronenberg stuff. It's very intensely taking the innate dislike of ourselves, which is actually particularly true for modern women. This manufactured image of, well, here's perfection, here's you. Why aren't you perfection? And letting that kind of spiral out of control, particularly because their lead character, Jun, is a model. She's supposed to be this image of perfection. And her friends, her colleagues, see her as this innately beautiful, perfect being. And she's so withdrawn from them because she sees all of her own flaws, all of her own weaknesses, and then she gets plunged into this series of events where she's bestial, where she's a monster, and she can't cope with this part of her personality, this part of her being, especially as people still celebrate her for being what everyone else should be, should look like. So it's a real mind job of a series.
Yep.
And that's not even getting into the sexual aspects of it.
Well, it's Go Nagai, what the do you expect?
Yeah, Go Nagai also deals with sex and violence is Go Nagai.
Go Nagai is one of those creators who is a complete and unabashed pervert, but just usually doesn't let that get in the way of him making good stuff.
Right.
Usually.
And in Devil Lady, there's this wonderfully intellectual streak, this wonderful question looming over everything of, yes, this is the behavior of monsters, of demons. But this is also your behavior, isn't it? This is also the way you think, isn't it? This isn't too far removed from what you do, is it? And that's what makes it really horror. That's what makes it terrifying.
Although I will say, it kind of, that's also a weakness of it, at least for my taste, because that goes back to what I said of, I really don't like any of the main characters. I can't stand any. In fact, my main criticism of it is the only characters I liked were side characters that didn't come in until about the last fifth of the show.
Right. The characters that come in the very end and are kind of supposed to meant to declare that there is hope for this world.
Well, yeah, there's a guy he's basically a Go Nagai mech pilot, just without a robot. And oddly enough, there are these, like, demon teenage girls, which, despite being stereotypical teenage girls, are actually likable, or maybe the rest of the characters are so reprehensible, I like them by comparison.
Right. And this isn't to say that Jun does horrible things or is a horrible character. She's just terribly broken by the end of this. And it's posed from the outset as the same heroic show that Devilman was, the same heroic comic that Devilman was. But whereas Devilman is a hero work,
well, yeah, I mean,
Devil Lady runs in the opposite direction, where there's nothing heroic about it. It's terrifying.
well, yeah, I mean, heck, with the '90s Devilman OVA, the tagline is only someone with a pure heart can control the body of a demon. With this, there's none of that.
Right. So, wonderful art, amazingly directed, powerful, not something you're going to watch because it's going to put a smile on your face unless you're a real horror enthusiast. And it's Go Nagai.
Yes.
And Go Nagai is awesome. Go Nagai is almost as awesome.
Wait for it. Wow, are you
As
blind?
Raideen.
Okay, there we go.
Raideen.
Wow, that was out of left field.
Are you saying Raideen isn't awesome?
No, I'm just saying. Raideen, I don't think is at the top of anyone's. Raideen isn't at the top of Raideen fans' brains.
Well, that's their problem, isn't it?
Fair enough. So yeah, with that, it is time to end.
It's because once again, we have decided that obscure Yoshiyuki Tomino mecha series are superior to obscure Go Nagai series.
We'll analyze that one later.
Yes.
So,
There's probably a book in there somewhere. But in any case,
yes. So from us here at Maison Otaku,
this is Justin,
and this is Mike, saying enjoy what you watch.
and share what you enjoy.